Thank you so much, Tom. This has been really helpful and just encouraging to myself. And I'm just like, oh, I've just got to get people to listen to this, and hopefully their souls will be blessed too. In terms of, helping other people, how do we balance in terms of giving to people, even within the church, with the understanding there will be people who will try to take advantage of our willingness to be a blessing, people
Right.
who will come in and almost give a sad story and a sob story.
Question.
How do we, combat that?
I'm actually glad you asked, because that was kind of an oversight on my part. I'm glad you asked. And I'm confident that Tom would agree with this. Here's what I would say. Now, let me first say this. If you're in a situation where you can meet a need and you want to meet a need and you want to do that on your own, fine, do that. But in the classical sense of what you just described, what is typically wise is when you become aware of a situation in the church, go to Tom and say, hey, I'm aware of, something that's come up. And I assume you have a fund, yes? Like a...
Yes. Well, actually,
I was going to say, because I'll just say this real quick, and then
yes.
Typical of what happened is you would go to Tom and say, I know of a need, and you would meet that need through the church.
Right.
Because you may have the wisdom of what that situation is.
Can I jump in and just say what we've done? It was a great question. It came up in the break too. And the picture is so clear in Acts that people came and they laid their gifts at the apostles' feet and they distributed them to anyone who was in need. And someone pointed out that you never see that in churches today. I mean, that's not the words they chose, but right, where does that happen? Well, I said, well, it happens here, and we're only a young church, but I'm thrilled to see the fact that whenever amongst our own fellowship someone's in need, we never have a problem as elders with finding people who want to give. And it's always much harder to meet the church budget, and that's another issue. And I could make a very good case to say that the church budget is a need, but when someone is unable to fund their transport to and from the hospital, that's happened in our church, or their daughter's medication, and they need funds for that, or some practical issue, people are just desperate to put their hands in their pocket and give. Praise God for that. But we've also had it in this church where someone's come in and got to know lots of different people in the church, and then I've heard, and Ross has heard, someone's giving to that brother, and they're giving someone else is giving to them, and someone else is giving to them, and then we've realised that the person had a gambling habit and they've been lying to everyone. Every single person that they creamed money from was fleeced, lied to. There was, I don't know if there ever was a real need, but all that money was gambled. Sorry if it was you and you didn't know about that. But that's happened here. Now, I mean, we tried to confront that person and they disappeared and they've never been back. But the reality is that happens. And also another reality has happened in the church is some people do have a need and they're vocal about it, and other people we might know have maybe a more urgent need and they're very quiet about it, but we know about it. And so the person who's vocal about their need is going to receive from lots of people, and the person who's quiet hardly receives anything. And so that's where the picture you have in Acts, where the people who know the widest spectrum of the congregation distribute that kind of benevolent giving according to each person's needs. That's the ideal situation. For that, you have to really be able to trust the people who you're giving your money to, don't you? I mean, you go to them, you say, I want to give to support those in need, and I trust you to know who's best in need. It also means that if you know about someone in need, you need to tell the people who should know about it, because maybe they don't. So the way we do it here at GraceLife London, we have an amount in our budget which we set aside for benevolent giving, but for issues like that. But so far we've never had to use it, because every time a need has come up, there have been individuals in the church, some of you, who've organised it in a casual manner, but you've very graciously told us about it. And the way we've dealt with it so far in the small church that we've had has been to say, okay, so-and-so, if you want to give to this need, give it to Asaro. Asaro is keeping an account, and he's telling us how much he's receiving and how much he's giving, and you can all see that, and it's all above board. And it's happened privately. It hasn't come through the church, it's come through an individual. And that's worked so far, but we're growing to the point where that can't keep on working. So we're going to need what Tom is talking about, which a lot of churches have, which is a benevolent fund, and that's just a separate account in our bank account, and that receives funds, and that you can pay out of that fund. You have a checkbook for that account.
Thank you.
So that's the way we're going. We've not got there yet,
Okay.
but that clarifies where we're at.
Well, in related, but you can Tommy, step here with me for a second. I'm going to. Related but unrelated. I wasn't going to hand this out, but I thought, you know what, let's get this out, because it just dawned on me too that Tom told me that you don't have this. It just came back to me. It's been a long afternoon. A little brain cells are dying. If you didn't know, these are the elements of expenses that GraceLife London has. Now, by design, obviously, there's no numbers here. This was actually a spreadsheet Tom gave me with numbers on it. But these are all the categories of expenditure, if you will. This is, if you want to look at it this way, this would be with numbers on it, GraceLife London's budget. It is GraceLife London's budget. And I would just ask you the question, just as you take this home and think about it, what on here is not ministry? When I'm in churches and speak on stewardship, one of the almost universal things I hear is that from pastors is that individuals don't want to give to light bills. They don't want to give to legal costs. They name a number of different things. They don't get that, we don't want to, we want to give to programs. We want to give to, things that go bump in the night or whatever. We don't want to give things that just, no. Everything on here is ministry. And these are the needs, if you will, of the local church here in London, called GraceLife London. And if you are, and Tom didn't pay me to say this, if you are fed here, if from here you gain your accountability, if from here you gain your encouragement, and I think all of those are probably true, then a labor is worthy of his hire, and a ministry is in need of being sustained. Now, there's different situations out there. We've got a sense of that today, and I want to be kind, because I know everybody is in different levels of all of this related to giving. But I just want to instill in you a sense that this is what you're giving to when you give to GraceLife London. All of these different moving parts. And no one is not essential. They are all essential.
Well, the pastor's pensions is non-essential because we're not paying it at the moment. But I'm just kidding. There are some and we're not paying ourselves a pension. That line item under personnel is 0 at the moment. But also there are things on here like church-wide retreat that we haven't had this year, and so it may have had a line in the budget, but we're not spending on it. So there are some things that we do drop on the budget because we're still on a kind of an emergency budget to get the church planted.
Yeah.
But there are other things that we can't drop, and obviously some things that we end up spending more on than we should. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Tom. You know, coming back to a question, I can't remember who asked it now. Someone, no, it was earlier. Someone asked the question about percentage and the amount, you know, how you work out what is a reasonable percentage of your income to give. Paris remembers who it was. Was it your wife? Okay, Jocelyn. So how you work that out? I mean, as Thomas said, it's down to us to decide, obviously spiritually, what we should give as we're able. But in terms of deciding what we need to give, I mean, that often determines how we see the urgency of any particular issue. I encourage people sometimes to work it backwards like this and to say, well, if for a church of our size, with the running costs that we have, and the costs that we need to meet, what sort of percentage would we all need to give of our income in order to meet all our costs ourselves? And if you work it out like that, and I haven't done that figure because I don't know, we've never been about finances. Tom talked today about what was the phrase you used? The mean income or the median income? Yeah,
the median income.
So the kind of average level of income in the church, I have no idea.
And if I may, just Tom and I had a conversation this afternoon, and often something I'll do in my teaching generally in churches is I'll help elders in coming along to understand. Often the discussion is about ministry. It's about it's a church-wide retreat that one of the pastors feels, for example, just picking on one, we really need to do this. And here's my vision for that. And here's why it's important. But maybe in pushing that forward in the budget, it pushes the budget over what it's been in previous years. And before you say, we can't do that, before you say that's beyond our church's ability to do, my encouragement has been to do two things. Consider what the giving potential is in your church, and there are ways that potentially you can arrive at that just through normal research, but then lay before the people what that ministry is and let them know, hey, here's something we believe God wants us to do. And it looks like it's above our ability, but what say you in terms of your giving potential? Is that fair?
Yeah, it's good. And I explained to Tom that we've only ever lived like that, beyond our ability. Well, okay, everyone, we don't have any money, but forwards. We did start off with the illustration of Lusitania. Forget the torpedoes. Just go far ahead. But a good question to ask if you're asking yourself, like, okay, well, what do I need to give? Where am I going to try and pitch my percentage? It is to say, well, what do I think is necessary to if this is my church, if this is nobody else should be responsible for this particular ministry. This is our ministry. So as a kind of a foundational, what should it cost? That can give you an idea. I mean, and as a ministry, it's not very difficult if you do some sums. It's not very difficult to work out. I mean, we publish our budget, so if you're a member here, and we don't hide it. You'll know how much the budget is, but you can get an idea of the running costs of a ministry like this, and then you can say, well, okay, what do we need to achieve? Divide that by the number of people that are coming, and then that can give you an idea of how the ministry could be funded by our own efforts. And then you've got to compare that to, well, and what can I do? And some people are going to be able to do a lot more than that, and some people are just not going to be able to do what that percentage would look like in their own budget. That becomes an impossibility. So that takes you back to giving as you're able. But if you're asking the question, as Joycelyn asked, how do I determine that? For Donna and I, for many years, we thought 10% was that's what Christians did. And so long time ago, we set 10% as our kind of baseline. We never want to give less than 10%. And just committed to give that first, to make that well, this is what we're, in our eyes back then, this is what we're required to give to God first. And the idea of giving to God first is very much taught through Scripture, that you kind of bring your offering to the Lord first, and then you worry about the rest of it. But the beauty of that is that having made that commitment many years ago, we just did get to see, through times that it didn't make sense, the Lord take care of us in amazing ways. So sometimes you kind of have to work out what you think is right, make that commitment, and then ask the Lord to help you through from there. Trudy.
Thanks, Tom. What do I do if I'm currently giving to other people, but I've been thinking about it and praying about it for some time. Do I, if I wanted to come out of that, for instance, and just have one partnership, how do I, I feel quite guilty about that if I have to sort of stop giving to this person and now continue. I mean, I do give my tithes, just for a coin of phrase, but I just would like to know how, if I wanted to get out of some others that I've been doing for at least 10 years, because I've got several, so.
It's a good question, and depending upon what the nature of it is, and you don't have to say, but depending on what the nature of it is, particularly if it's a situation where the recipient has been planning on that, the kind way to do it is to express that you're going to do it and begin weaning from it rather than just doing it all at once. I would say do it gradually. But again, not to go on with what we've talked about, it really comes down to, and I can tell you in the United States, the pattern for missions, because our daughter was for a time a commissioned missionary with a mission agency and planning to go to Africa. Missions in the United States has transitioned from being church-based, church-supported, to individual-supported. That has become the pattern, for good or ill, and nothing against missions. I'm standing in a work that's an outreach of Grace Missions, but that can be troublesome when individuals do take on a lot of those commitments, and then the local church suffers. Certainly, those commitments are fine over and above. But all that to say would be the way I would handle that, is to do that kindly, express that, if that's where you are, and that individual, or you may be surprised, they may say, you know what, we've been getting along fine. We could get along fine without that, so we can start right away. You just don't know potentially where that situation might be. But I appreciate your sensitivity to that, to be sure. Yes, sir. Thanks for all your help this afternoon, too, by the way.
Pleasure. Firstly, thank you for this material. It's been helpful for me just in terms of thinking through. Just started a new job about a month and a half ago, so it's been good for me to stop and to think through, okay, earning a lot more money than I was in my previous job. Okay, how do I better use this money? To quote a friend of ours, one of his sermons, whose money is it anyway? It's not mine. So how can I best think through that? But one question that comes to mind is, sometimes when you hear people speak about stewardship, it almost comes across as a sort of asceticism. So, using money to, enjoy things, absolutely not. No, as a Christian, you live a sort of bare minimum existence. How do we balance the sort of hedonism that our culture tells us, which we know clearly, biblically, absolutely not, against the sort of asceticism, almost as though if you're truly spiritual, you kind of almost live on gruel, bare standard of living, there's no sense of enjoyment of these gifts that God has given to us. How do you balance that and find where the biblical norm is?
Well, it's a good concept, and I guess the best analogy I could use to answer that is give as you purpose in your heart. God doesn't expect you to give and compromise your standard of living. How do I say that? It comes down to your motivation for giving, why you're giving. But if you've determined a level of giving that you feel good about, to give more than that just because you feel like it's something you need to do, or someone's impressed upon you a percentage, they say even higher than 10, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what you ought to do. It really is an individual thing, what your giving level is. And I was going to say something else and it went totally out of my head. But I know what I was going to say. There is an illustration in the New Testament, in the teaching of Christ, where the scribes and Pharisees, we've read this, right, where they would, giving was one of the examples, and they would let everybody know what they were giving, so that Christ said, you will have the praise of men. What did he say? You've got your reward. That's why you're giving, you've got your reward. And if you're giving simply because you feel like, look at me, you're giving for all the wrong reasons. And if you will, you have your reward. Giving the Lord's work, whether it's meeting the needs of GraceLife London, the local church, or it's meeting needs, whether it's something you do formally or informally, that's a very private thing. That's between you and the Lord. And only you and the Lord know how grateful you are for his work of grace in your life, and only you and the Lord know. Let me say it this way: if your Christian life is leveled off, and you just don't feel like you're experiencing God's blessing, things just seem like they're hard, maybe something's short-circuited somewhere. Sometimes that's an indication that, maybe I'm not quite doing what the Lord has called me to do. And there are times in our lives when we can short-circuit God's blessing. And it's those times when we withhold, or maybe we do things for the wrong motives. Does that make sense? Would you agree with that?
Thank you. I've heard some preachers say, some very famous preachers say, get yourself on a wartime budget. You probably know who I'm talking about, and they're good preachers, by the way. They're people that say that, and Christian. We're at war, but you put yourself on a wartime budget, and then everything else just give to God. I think that's just made up a rule for what someone should only do, motivated by love and grace. It's all very well to kind of impose that rule on someone else. Another example, which I've always thought was amazing, is the Christian builder, Lang. I don't know if you've seen that name around the city, Laing. The story goes, Christian builder, I think a very solid Christian, made an awful lot of money. Once his wages hit a certain point, he said, we don't need any more than this. Above and beyond this, we're devoting our income to the kingdom, to promote Christian. And they have gone on in this country to support enormous amounts of gospel work historically. I don't know what the situation is now. But, So I get the idea of saying, well, look, I only need this much. I think when you're starting out in life, there's also tremendous wisdom in asking. I mean, I don't want to be too personal about it in a public question, but some young people setting out in life forget that, yes, you do need to save up quite a bit of money if you want to have a deposit on a place just to rent, let alone to buy. You need to save up quite a bit of finances for when your laptop dies and you need a new one. And so remembering to say, as your income increases, remembering to use some of that increase to better prepare yourself for the future, whether you want to get married in the future and you want to
or have children.
Exactly. Start, and the old, financially, the adage is that the earlier you start saving, the bigger the effects in the long run. If you want to start saving now for your children that you don't have, hey, praise God, let the banks take care of some of the blessing. Compound interest is supposed to be quite a useful thing, except when it's 0% times 0%.
I love going to some of the old restaurants in the United States, and they show pictures of the old banks, and it's engraved on the building, 3-4%. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen any of those, but it's like, really? Yeah.
So my question is, how do you discern how to give to people outside of the church? So, for example, it just seems to be so many needs in the world. Like, you see so many TV adverts where there's, people who are really suffering, or even on the streets when you're walking around, there are some people who come up to you and ask for money. And I know some of them, or I would say most of them, might be con men, I don't know. But it's quite difficult to know how, where to put your money in those circumstances. And even some of the charities, they may use their money in ways that you may not, as a Christian, agree with. But it's quite difficult to know how to do that.
It's a good question, and there are a lot of how should I say it, quote unquote ministries out there that would promote their needs. And a starting place would be Pastor Tom and the leadership here. I dare say Tom is never going to say to you, don't give to a legitimate ministry if you feel so led to do so. And he's not going to ask you, how much of our money is that going to take away? If we laugh about that and be facetious, but there are a lot of good ministries out there. There are a number that may not be so legitimate, but I would say through counsel, maybe Tom wouldn't know somebody necessarily, but he might be able to find out some things for you. The internet is a wonderful tool. There are ways that it's hard to do something illegitimate for very long today, just with the way the internet is. And the website can be a good tool for that. But I would say just do your homework. I'll take an example, and this isn't for any other reason than just to throw it out. Samaritan's Purse has done a number of things over the years. And I have a very dear friend, one of our board members at Master's College and Seminary is on their board. It's Franklin Graham's ministry. So they're doing some very good humanitarian things. So and I don't single them out, it's just an illustration of where there are a number of ministries out there. But I also know that as we in the United States would watch television, any given hour in the evening, there's, feed the children things. And again, not taking anything away from the legitimate needs that they're trying to meet, but you need to determine what it is you want to be involved in. And if somebody really piques your interest, check them out, research them out.
I chime in?
Sure.
I think you can also add two things. You know, the guys on the street, the chuggers. Probably someone in our church works as a chugger. Sorry, it's a combination of charity and mugger. Because they mug you for charity as you walk down the street, and they jump on you and say, "Can I just take a moment?" They want to speak to you, but they don't want to speak to you. They want you to sign up to give. And you know, my standard response is, "I'm already overcommitted." Donna told me off earlier because I said, you know, gave the impression that we're committed to the 10% thing now. You know, we when we learned about grace-driven giving, we've since that time wanted to just we've always kept 10% as a minimum baseline, but we've always wanted to give as we're able, and praise God we've been able to. But where you give and who you give to is kind of a responsibility of stewardship, isn't it? It's choosing how to use the Lord's money in the best way that you can. And one of the things which has really rung in my ears from many years ago, because I wanted our church, going back 18 years or so ago, I wanted our church to give to a particular cause. And one of the deacons in our church said to me, "Tom, that's a good cause, and there's nothing wrong with it. But we're giving to..." I was in a Reformed Baptist church, and he said, "We're going to stick to giving to the Reformed Baptist mission, because if we don't give, who else is going to give to them?" And this really echoed in my mind, because there is this kind of responsibility that we have to take care of the area of the Lord's vineyard that we work in. And there are lots and lots of other good ministries and good missions and you know, worthy works. But if we don't take care of the area that we're committed to theologically, nobody else is going to. And sometimes the larger ministries that spend money on advertising do so because they're trying to scoop up the kind of odd people out there who will just give to whatever tugs at their heartstrings most. And I think we do have a responsibility not to be just drawn by simple advertising. So I'd echo what Tom said: do the research, find out if this is something which you feel you want to commit to based on, you know, a certainty.
Down here first, sorry. Easy wait.
Zola first.
Yeah, it was in terms of taxes. For the church to claim all the taxes, we kind of need to put our name down. Some people like me might not feel comfortable about putting, you know, their name down. I just don't like putting my name down when I give. So how do we? What's the solution for it?
I don't know how it works exactly in the UK, but I can tell you that in the United States, to be able to take a tax deduction, to get tax credit for the gift, you have to have a recorded gift to your name. So I don't know how it works here. I would guess it probably is the same way.
Yeah, it's the same. But I mean, you know, I just feel like if I give, I don't need to put my name down. I just give. But obviously, I just heard the pastors talking about claiming, you know, taxes, and obviously the church could make a lot more money by doing so. So do we still need, you know, put our name down? I mean, certain people we may struggle with, I don't know, pride issues, may feel like, you know what, I don't want to put my name down because I might feel a certain way if I put my name down, you know. I mean, I don't know. Just, do you know what I'm saying? Oh.
Yeah, I think so. If you're saying that you're okay with giving without getting any kind of recognition for it within the tax system, then that's in your heart to do. If you're giving and you want to, though, take it, get proper credit for that giving, then Tom, I don't know. Do you know if I'm understanding the question?
Thanks. Yeah, it works differently over here to the States.
I'm sensing it does. So I'm kind of stumbling here a little bit.
The way we can do it, the way it works is we can claim back tax from the government based on the amount that taxpayers give, but it has to be recorded. Now, it is possible to do that anonymously. Now, at least one person in the church has to know, because you have to have a treasurer who submits the accounts, but we do have a number system. So for people that want to give anonymously, you can get a number assigned to you, and then you just have to put your number on your giving, on your envelope, and that can be then tracked back. But they still have to have your name and address, and they still have to add up what you've given and supply that to the accountant, who then claims the money back from the government. So nobody else in the church needs to know, but one person needs to know. At the moment, that one person is Anita, who works in the office. So otherwise, people can give, but if you give anonymously, it can't. The 25% can't be claimed. And that's a choice you make. I would say, the people who often say, I don't want to give, go on the basis that don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. But if you study that verse out in context, it's not necessarily supporting the idea of anonymous giving. The other verse which is used is the fact that the Pharisees announced it on the street corner with blowing trumpets in front of them, but that really doesn't say that it has to be anonymous. It's just that there's discretion versus anonymity. It were two different things, and one was pride, and another was the one is decrying pride. So the need for absolute anonymity, I don't think is there biblically, but if anyone wants to maintain that, then that is their privilege, and we're obviously grateful as a church to receive any support. I think the times may come when the government is going to say, unless you support our inclusive agenda, we're not going to give you these tax breaks anyway. And so all of a sudden, all the tax benefits that we received will stop. But that's not yet. In the meantime, I'm happy to receive it, but we just do need to remember as a church, we mustn't ever become in the pocket of the government.
I wanted to ask two questions again. Firstly, to my shame, I did the maths and realised you did have children really early. But you also said that you worked for two Fortune 500 companies and worked within business as well. So my first question is, how did you manage to do that at a young age with children, be married? And secondly is, if someone was presented with two job offers, is it okay for them to pick the job that pays better simply because it pays better? Or should they, after weighing a lot of factors, the sole reason was this one paid better? Is that okay for a Christian to do?
Those are good questions. I mean, how did we do it young with kids? It wasn't easy, but we tried to put the Lord first in everything that we did, and we showed that to the kids. So it wasn't easy, but we just made it a priority, and part of it was driven by some very godly mentors that I benefited from. I have one thing I didn't say this afternoon, and we've lost quite a few, but I'll just say for those that remain, and I may bring it back up tomorrow. There is no substitute. I did say it. There is no substitute for godly mentors. I have a rare situation, people tell me. I have about 6 to 8 guys that I can call at any given time from any different location that are accountability partners and sounding boards that have the right to tell me anything they want to tell me, observing anything in me that they observe, and back at them. I can do the same thing. 2 of those, well, more than 2, but 2 in particular, really prayed me into this role because this was something that I was not looking to do. And yet this was one of those situations where the Lord just wrote it in the sky. And these 2 friends saw it almost before I did and said, you need to do this. This is an absolute no-brainer. So that would be my first answer, is through a lot of support. And some of that started all the way back then. To the whole job dynamic, and I had this discussion with somebody else earlier too. There's nothing wrong with taking the better paying job if all things are equal. But don't take the better paying job just because it's a better paying job, particularly if, and I heard somebody use this phrase, and I use it carefully because I don't want to sound weird about this, but there's something, sometimes the Spirit, Holy Spirit, does things in us called, I like how he characterized it, UIPs, unidentified inner promptings. Sometimes there's just something not right about something. We can't put our finger on it. And I would say that if you're weighing 2 opportunities, and if the one that pays more is one that you just, something doesn't feel right, be careful. The Holy Spirit is living inside of us. He is not to be quenched. And that's sometimes what he does, I believe. So I've been in those situations. And sometimes taking the better paying one, sometimes not. And when I didn't, I never regretted it. Particularly in that environment I was in. You had to understand the environment I was in, but in that environment, it was very much a dynamic. And before it was really all decided anyway, they made it clear that they weren't the right choice anyway. But in and of itself, at the base level, again, there's nothing wrong with making money. Just recognize that if the better opportunity is what you opt for, maybe the reason the Lord is giving you that is so that you can in fact do something with that you might not have otherwise been able to do. Maybe that's why he is putting that before you. Does that make sense?
So basically, we were speaking about how much you can tithe, how much you can contribute to the church. And something that I have done over time is contributed my time, both to the church and individuals that I know. And I wonder whether this is a way of also keeping myself afloat, but still giving help to other people, whether it's helping them move house or, or giving them, I have a law degree, so giving them legal advice, things like that could help them financially as well, just because I'm in this situation at the moment. And later on, when I do have money, I can be giving again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, if I understand the question, there's nothing wrong with helping individuals, to be sure. But there's a lot of principles in Proverbs about who should be helped and who shouldn't. Which comes back a little bit to what Tom said earlier. Sometimes individuals that seem to present needs, maybe that isn't the first time they've experienced that need. And that is necessarily the situation you described, but you just need to be careful and a little circumspect about that. I've experienced that too, when you have a situation and you want to be able to help out, but you just need to be careful about that. And be wise about that. At one level, particularly if it's giving of your time and supporting in some regard, I don't know that you can ever do too much. But when it comes to material resources, you do need to be a little careful about how you handle that. So.